Welcome to God Powered. Now, when we are faced with the battle, what is the thing that we absolutely rely on to carry us through? What's that thing we're absolutely dependent on? Now, I know there's a tendency for us to want what I call a fairy tale Christianity. And a fairy tale Christianity is where everything is smooth, we've got God on our side, and there's nothing greater that we have to face than a speed bump in life. And we just move forward in grace to our destiny. And as much as you and I would love for that to be the case, the reality is our life, while we do have seasons of God just smooths it all out. God is just making it easy. But we also face a season of challenges in our life. Crises, battles, whatever term you want to put on it. And God allows those because those are the things that cause us to grow, to mature, to strengthen, and they propel us into our destiny. So when we're faced with these issues, when these challenges, or in this case, as we'll see in a moment, a battle, what is it we absolutely rely on? Now, I know you're sitting here going, yeah, but that's so easy. It's the Lord. But we're going to look at a story today in 1 Samuel chapter 4. And what we're going to see is how we really approach it. And I think there's some valuable lessons we're going to learn here. And because it is so absolutely you and I. And so what happens? So in 1 Samuel chapter 4, the Philistines, who are kind of the perennial enemy, they're attacking God's people. And so what happens? God's people, the army responds and they go into battle with the Philistines. And in the midst of the battle, the Philistines defeat them and 4,000 men are killed. And so they come back, God's people come back and they're crying out to God, how can this be? God, they attacked us and Lord, we're going in your name. We're your people. How could you let this happen to us? See what happened? They did what you and I do. When we are faced with that challenge, the first thing we do is we deal with it at our own strength. Physical strength, intellect, emotional, whatever it is. We don't tend to immediately go to God. What do? We tend to go try to deal with it ourselves. And so again, what was the result? They're in anguish. Lord, how could you let this happen to us? So then they go to plan B. Now in this case, plan B was they grabbed the Ark of the Covenant. They said, okay, we are absolutely going to show that we're God's people now. We're absolutely going to represent God in this. Why? We're taking the Ark, which represents our relationship with God, we're taking that into the battle with us. We're going to represent, okay? And it's going to be obvious we're God's people. And so what happens? They take the Ark, and it actually looks initially like this is going to work for them. Because it says the Philistines had heard of God's reputation. They knew what God was like, and they were terrified. But it says that the Philistines fought desperately. And so what happens? The Philistines win again, and this time they kill 30,000 of God's troops. And again, in anguish. And in the process, not only do they kill 30,000 of God's troops, they capture the Ark of the Covenant. They actually capture the representation of God's relationship with his people. Now, how could God let that happen? And we're going to come back, we'll see that in a moment. But here's what we want to look at is this. See, what we never see in this process, that they face the challenge. See, we don't see where they were actively seeking out God. They were actively seeking his presence. First, they were just dealing with it in their own intellect and strength, and that didn't work. So then what did they do? They used a representation of God. See, there is a tendency in them, in me, and you, and what do? It's almost going back to fairy tale Christianity. It's like God is our good luck charm. I've got God in my back pocket, so to speak. And yeah, tough time might come, but God won't let us lose because God is on our side. You know what? See, here's the alternative, and here's the other way to look at it. In Exodus 33, now this is a whole different situation. There's no battle. God is talking to Moses, and God says, hey, I'm giving you the destiny. I'm giving you the promised land. You're going to lead the people there. And what does Moses say? This is all good. God is making these great promises. But see, Moses had learned something along the way. He had learned a truth. And what did Moses say? Moses said, if you don't go with us, don't send us. If your presence, forget your blessing. God said, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to bless you. No, forget that. If your presence is not among us, don't send us. See, Moses had come to learn what was the real value here. See, the real value was in God's presence. The real value was in that relationship. The protection, the blessing, those are all byproducts. Moses had learned what was the important thing here. See, what we don't see, going back to 1 Samuel chapter 4, is we don't see them seeking God's presence. They were concerned about their situation, and they couldn't believe that God would let his people suffer. They couldn't believe that God would let his people lose. See, they were seeking the wrong thing. Now, it was the right thing, but for the wrong reason. See, God wanted to give them the victory. But God isn't going to give you and I the victory unless his presence is not right there among us. We have to be like Moses, and it says, Lord, unless your presence goes with us, don't send us. And how serious does God take this? Well, let's go back. How is it God could not just let them lose worse, but he would allow that representation of his relationship with his people to be captured? See, what do we always say? God will be glorified. That's always the first priority. And we, in our thinking, would go, God, surely he wouldn't allow them to capture the ark. But God did. And even in that, God gained glory. But he was not going to allow his people to substitute the desire of his presence for victory. And so he allowed them to lose. He allowed the ark to be captured. But what happens? Now, if you know the story, it gets put in a Philistine temple. God keeps knocking their God over. Basically, he shattered everything that they believed in to the point they were desperate to get rid of the ark. God was glorified even in being captured. And so what happens? God's people wind up getting the ark back, and they didn't even battle for it. God dealt with it. See, the secret is this, and I'm still learning it. We continually learn it the rest of our life. Let us be like Moses, who really understood, yeah, God, your protection is great, your blessing is great, but your presence is more important. And unless your presence goes with us, don't send us. When you're faced with the challenge, it's time to take a step back and just, are we pursuing his presence? Are we pursuing that relationship? Focus on that first. As urgent and as immediate as the battle seems, take a step back. Focus on his presence. And then let the byproduct be God fighting on our behalf. This has been God Powered. I'm Randy Gladden. God has amazing plans for you.